Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. Happy Friday, it's September 5th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. 60 years ago, the community of Delano became the birthplace of a movement. That was when workers who were picking grapes decided to go on strike.
I remember hearing the shouting, the anger, the frustration in their voices.
Coming up, a conversation about the history behind the Delano grape strike and the community keeping the legacy alive. But first, these headlines. Fresno and Bakersfield are listed in a new study that looks at, quote, distressed economic regions in the country. The study by the Brookings Institution says about 10% of Americans live in labor markets that are severely distressed. That includes the San Joaquin Valley. The study's author says creating more job opportunities is necessary to help people live and stay in these regions. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, is alleging the U.S. Border Patrol broke the terms of a court order during a raid in Sacramento. A judge earlier this year barred agents from random stops of people suspected of being in the country without legal status. That order applied to the Central Valley. But as KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado reports, a chief with the Border Patrol says their operations will continue in places like Los Angeles.
Greg Bovino is the chief patrol agent of the U.S. Border Patrol's El Centro sector. The sector includes parts of Southern California, including Calexico and Riverside. Most recently, Border Patrol agents have swept through parts of Los Angeles. In an interview with the Associated Press, Bovino says his agents have strict orders to go after anyone suspected of being in the country without permission.
If they're going to come in here and sell flowers on the street corner, that's giving them something. Absolutely not. What about the folks that are in line that are proud to be Americans, flying the American flag?
The Trump administration is relying on these types of efforts to carry out its mass deportation agenda, and Bovino says agents will do the work until there is, quote, no problem. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
A pilot project in California's prisons will test ways to keep prison cells cooler. The project will begin at 3 state prisons and will involve testing cooling systems and new insulation. The state's prison system has faced pressure from activists who've called out extreme heat inside the facilities. The pilot project will cost about $38 million. Prison officials say they will use their findings to form a statewide strategy to address extreme heat. Governor Gavin Newsom has been everywhere this year, fighting back against redistricting efforts in Texas, renouncing President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in California, launching a new podcast. Yet Californians have no official record of Newsom's whereabouts in 2025. Alexi Kossoff with CalMatters explains.
Governor Newsom has not released any of his 2025 calendars, even though he's required to release them promptly under California law. That's because the governor's calendars are considered a public record. CalMatters has requested them each month. But Newsom's office has not explained the delay, and they have ignored questions about when they expect to release the records, even though providing an estimated delivery date is also required by law. Though these calendars list only official events, which even then are sometimes redacted, they still offer the public the most information about who Newsom is speaking to and how he prioritizes his time.
That was Alexi Kossoff with our California newsroom partner, CalMatters. A fish hatchery is set to restore rainbow trout on the Kern River. Our news partner, SJV Water, reports the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will spend $7 million to get a fish hatchery it owns back up and running in Kernville. The agency says the hatchery is necessary to maintain the species, which is listed as of concern. Lower river flow and warmer waters pose challenges to restoring the trout.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. 60 years ago, grape workers in Delano walked off the job and changed the course of labor history in the United States. This weekend, the Delano Chapter of the Filipino American National Historical Society is celebrating the 60th anniversary of the famous Delano Grape Strike. It started on September 8th in 1965. And it was started by Filipino farm workers who were demanding better wages for their work. Mexican farm workers eventually joined them and set off the modern farm worker movement through the United Farm Workers, or UFW union. At the time, the strike gained national attention and it left farmers in a jam. Farm workers even organized a 300-mile pilgrimage from Delano to Sacramento to demand fair wages and union contracts with grape growers that still exist today. Suzanne Villaruz was a young girl when the strike began. She also helped organize this weekend's Delano Grape Strike Remembrance event. It'll feature California's Attorney General Rob Bonta and labor rights activist Dolores Huerta. Suzanne joined me to discuss the event and starts by taking us back to what prompted the famous strike.
The men who started the Delano Grape Strike were Filipino men. They were in their 60s, most of them, many of them. Some were in their 50s. They had immigrated to the United States in the 1920s, specifically for labor. Some of them had worked in the sugarcane fields in Hawaii, but then they were imported here to California. And they got here, they worked in the fields for 30, almost 40 years for some of them. And they heard about a group down south. I think they were working strawberries, and they got 25 cents or 20 cents more an hour. And the Filipino men decided, hey, it would be fair if we asked for another 15 cents an hour to go from $1.15 to $1.30. And they decided they asked and then were refused. So then they thought, what do we do? And thus began the thinking of beginning a strike. They knew that the grapes had to be picked by hand and managed by hand. There were no machines at the time. So they voted after heated discussions.
Can you paint us a picture of what the striking actually looked like for those of us who weren't there? Like, were people picketing with signs? Were they walking off the job? Like, historically, how important was this moment and what did it look like?
I spent the day that they were voting, and, it's the Filipino Hall was a hall built by Filipinos who could not own land. They could only purchase the building and the property by forming a corporation. But they met in that hall, and it was crowded, it was hot, no air conditioning. I was 6 years old, I was playing in the backyard. But I remember hearing the shouting, the anger, the frustration in their voices, not sure what it meant. The leaders were sitting at a table, and they said, do we strike? And they knew what striking meant. And someone raised their hand, I believe it was Bob Armington, and he said, I vote we strike. And it was seconded by a chorus. And they voted, and they were going to strike. This is September 7th, 1965. The next day at a set time, I want to say it was noon, they just walked out of the fields. They took the grapes that they had picked, laid them carefully on the ground, and walked out. And when they did that, the farmers realized our fruit is going to rot in the sun. What are you guys doing? And they said, we're striking. We're striking for 15 cents an hour more. And instead of going from 15 cents a piece for a box of grapes, which were 35, 40 pounds, to lift and carry, they wanted 25 cents. So those were their initial demands, if I remember correctly. And that's what started it. They coordinated it perfectly. One day, one time, everyone left.
Mainly in the Delano area?
In our area, but it followed suit very quickly up and down the valley.
Many people are aware of the work of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. They contributed to different strikes and the farm labor movement in general, but we have to talk about Larry Itliong, who really kicked off the grape strike. So could you tell us more about how he advocated for farm workers and specifically Filipino farm workers?
Larry Itliong was a very charismatic person. He worked in the canneries in Alaska, and they organized there. So he knew what it meant. He had come to the United States to study to become a lawyer. You have to remember when people immigrated from the Philippines after Spanish occupation and U.S. occupation in the early turn of the century, coming to the United States was, a land of milk and honey, streets paved in gold. Education was the great equalizer. Well, he found out quickly, not for him, not for people of color. So he had a very keen mind. And I worked for Larry when I was 16 years old. He needed someone to answer the phones. And I guess my mom got me the job. My mom was really good friends with him and Philip Veracruz. And I would go every day to his little office building in old Chinatown, Delano's Chinatown. And he always taught me something. He was always talking about like the origin of our family name. It was Spanish. It meant we're the House of Roses. And he talked about my mom and how smart she was and how hard my father had worked until he died. My father died in 1970, just before the contracts were signed, so he never saw a union contract. But Larry always pushed education. He knew that the young people he was around, he encouraged to go to school. He encouraged us. He told me, you need to go to university. You don't want to work in the fields. It's hard work. Don't do that. It's hot. It's dirty. You need to be educated, and then you could do what you want. And that's what I remember most about him. When he got angry, it was hilarious. I mean, he tried not to show his anger in front of me because I was 16 years old, but nothing frustrated him more when he heard someone come in and tell him, this is happening. It's not fair. And things that were not fair would just frustrate him to no end.
I'm curious what kind of legacy the Grape strike has left on Delano, because it was a difficult time in some ways. Is it a time that people look back fondly on, or was it more of a growing moment?
10 years ago, we had the 50th anniversary of everything, and people came back from all over the United States that had worked for the UFW. And it was a sense of camaraderie, of reminiscing, of brotherhood. But there are still growers and people who lived in Delano. They were of a very pale complexion, if you know what I mean. And they still see it as a violent time, that it actually created more racial divide. And I see their point. My sister posted a comment about our event this Saturday. And a woman who was a little girl at the time, she was a younger sister of one of my sister's friends, posted that it was a terrible time. There were fights in the streets and there was all this violence. And I thought, you were 2. But that's the stories that have been told to her by her families and their friends and things like that. And if you look at it, 2 sides of Delano, west side versus east side, the farm workers versus the growers, lived in the same town within a mile of each other. And they had 2 different views of it. And going to high school in Delano, we all went to the same high school, growers' kids and farm workers' kids. So on campus, we were pretty much okay. Occasional fights, but then, teenagers. But it's a time that doesn't really resonate well sometimes with the community of Delano who have been here for 50 years or more. Some people remember it fondly. Some people remember it as disruptive.
That was Suzanne Villaruz, event coordinator with the Delano chapter of the Filipino American National Historical Society. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And again, the Delano chapter of the Filipino American National Historical Society is putting on this free event. You can find details and the schedule of events for tomorrow's celebration on Eventbrite. And that is today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
It's rare to find a podcast that can actually change your life. But when the show's called Life Kit, that's kind of the whole point. I'm Mariel Segarra. 3 times a week on the Life Kit podcast, we guide you through a topic we could all use help with, from personal development to healthy living to managing your dinero. with takeaways so you can start living what you learn right away. Escucha el Life Kit podcast from NPR.